in relationship with our counterparts of the different OCs have been framing it in the offer that we're giving. So mentoring by the mentoring programs of the different operational sections of MSF is offered to first-time coordinators, and the focus of the mentoring, the goal of the mentoring is on the discovery and the confidence in a given position. So a mentor can share relevant knowledge and experience. While coaching, we offer it when a staff want to improve on his or her performance on a certain set of skills, and the focus is on the career path. And a coach doesn't necessarily need to have experience in the job. So this is a very, very, very brief definition, but just to highlight a little bit how we see mentoring and coaching from the different programs as they are operated in the different sections. To confuse you even a little bit more, similar skills can be used in mentoring and coaching. In this webinar, we will highlight a number of those coaching skills and where they can actually be used during the mentoring sessions. Over to you, Agnese.
Thank you, Richard. So we would like to start with giving a bit of an overview of like how and where the relationship, the mentoring relationship happens. So if you look at this graph, you see that there's on the left side, like the professional support, and on the right side, the personal support. So the relationship does look at the mentee as a whole person. So the relationship can and should, range from professional and personal issues, because as we know, especially in MSF and especially in the field, personal and professional are extremely related and influencing one another. So, for example, your colleagues are your friends and family in the field. And, for example, we talk a lot about work-life balance. So it is important to, be able to go in both places with the relationship. Also, we have, as you can see on the top, the directive, and at the bottom, the non-directive type of support. So we're going to look how the different roles of the mentors can, be distributed around in this graph. But basically, the mentor does sometimes take a more like opinionated approach and more like an advisory role, and does give advice, and at times instead goes more into the non-directive way, which is the self-discovery of the mentee, the low pressure type of growth and development. So the first role I wanted to introduce is the guide, and that's probably the most like stereotypical mentoring hat posture a mentor can have, and it's really the one that shares the experience that when requested, that gives an advice. Here you can have opinion that come from your experience because you've been in the mentee's shoes. You have been faced with the same challenges the mentee is facing. So here is really when your experience in the same position is key and is important and is a resource for the mentor to share with the mentee. Then we have the friend, and the friend is really the one that we use, that hat we put on when we build a rapport at the beginning of the relationship. Every time we check in with our mentee to know how he's doing, we're really engaged and really committed to the mentee's well-being. And this is also what creates that safe space, that trust that allows the mentee then to really open up and really take an honest look at him or herself. And the friend is also the one that can speak openly, because in the relationship it is known that it comes from a place of non-judgment and trust. And so, for example, here the mentor can give some feedback to the mentee that maybe colleagues or even managers try to avoid, the difficult conversations. And can even challenge the mentee to look at things differently. Then we have the reflector, and that's really like more on the professional side, is the sounding board. It's when you have an idea, you want to test it, you want to make sure that, your idea is going to be successful, or if it's likely to be successful or not. Here's where brainstorming happens. Here's when ideas can be shared. And then we have the coach. And that's really the hat we're going to try to focus on today. The coach is really kind of almost like the opposite of the guide. So here you really put aside your experience. You put aside what you know of to be truth about that experience. You do not share opinions. You're really non-judgmental, and you really trust completely and fully that the mentee has all the answers he or she needs to face the situation. So what I want to highlight is that all these roles are actually what we call situational mentoring. What that means is that given the situation you're faced as a mentor, you will decide which hat to put on. So here we're not asking you to be a coach, not at all. It's just that you're going to be using, for example, coaching skills, and that's what we're going to be looking into today to support the growth and the self-exploration of the mentee. So of course, like through a session, it's like a dynamic dance, right? So you could wear different hats. But as you see, I mean, almost all our roles are very much into the lower part of our graph. And that's because the approach we chose as MSF for mentoring is really non-directive. We do this because we do not want to interfere in operations. We do not want to step on into anyone's role. The mentee has plenty of technical support. The manager for strategic decisions. This is not a role we feel we want to cover in the mentoring. So it's more really to allow that space for the mentee to have his own reflections, come up with his own truths. So this is really why we decided to do this seminar, is really to offer a bit like skills, a bit like toys to play with for you guys, and go out there and try them out in your mentoring relationship. Before we go into the coaching skills, we would like to take a look at what we call the phases of a normal standard mentoring session. Throughout our research in the Mentoring and Coaching Hub, we've seen that these are usually the 3 phases that are present, and they do take each 1/3 of the time of the session. So the first one being venting. The venting is really usually typically the start of the session, and it's when the mentee opens up. It's when the mentee shares maybe updates, maybe successes from last time, or frustration, just steaming off, just letting it go. And so it's extremely important. It's not just a chat. It's really when the connection is created between the mentee and the mentor, an emotional connection as well. And it's important for the mentor as well, because it's when he gets the information. And it's important for the mentee because it's when he starts to check in with him or herself. How am I? What is on my mind? Am I stressed? Am I okay? And at the same time, it's starting to let go of things, and it's starting to see what's happening and starting to be seen and listened. Then naturally the discussion moves into a reflection, meaning you start to analyze, maybe reflect upon the things that have been brought up in the venting. And this is where the insight, here we're looking for the insight, for the awareness. We want to increase the awareness of the mentee on that given topic. And here's when, the mentor can hold up a mirror for the mentee, see, show the reflection, right? Really the reflection on the mirror of the mentee. So you're feeding back to the mentee what you see. And here you can also challenge assumptions. If you see that there are certain narratives, that the mentee is holding, this is when you can say, this is the narrative I see you're using. And also in the evaluation we had, the evaluation of impact of the mentoring program, we saw that challenging, being challenged in your beliefs, in your narrative, is something the mentee values a lot. So do not shy away from using that card. Here's also when maybe we move towards solutions, if solutions are necessary. And here's when the mentor can go into his, his reflector hat, act as a sounding board, share his knowledge or her knowledge, provide some, opinions, help the brainstorming, and so on. Then naturally again, we move into work on competencies. And so that bit is when we connect the topic of the session, of that session you're at right now, to the broader goals of the relationship. So let's say we've decided with my mentee to work on leadership, and the topic is about the mentee feeling that he's struggling with his communication or her communication. And so then the mentor can suggest a link between the two topics. Right? So how is that your communication style impacting your leadership? So these three phases are, of course, very dynamic, and you would maybe step, at any given time on each one of them and then go back to the other one. So it's not necessarily linear. So now what we've decided to do is to identify 3 coaching skills for each of these phases for you to have like a hook to hang them on. And so that you will practice, when you're inventing, for example, 3 coaching skills and so on and so forth. So this is it for me. Like, Richard, do you want to add before we move on? Anything?
No, move on to venting.
Mm-hmm.
So the first phase that of a typical mentoring conversation or session described by Agnese was venting. And we identified 3 coaching skills that we believe you can very well use during the venting part of the mentoring session. The first one is clearing. It is something, and Agnese mentioned that already, it is something that you probably do already pretty natural when you are opening a mentoring conversation. Your mentee comes in and the person is full of it. It is a bit like letting off some steam. It needs to be out there, otherwise it's probably not very useful to start a mentoring conversation where you would focus on certain topics. So there needs to be a clearing. It needs to be out of the system what is in the way. And when you apply that skill, that coaching skill as a mentor, is you actually name it. So you say, okay, let's talk about that. I see that you are full of this, or hey, I see that this is occupying you very much. So by naming it, you make it also clear for the mentee that there is a clear need for that. And then you can also actually, by naming it, you can also close it and say, hey, now that is out of the way. Can we now focus on what you want to talk about today? So you bring it back actually to the topic or topics that the mentee wanted to bring for that particular session. The second is intuition. Of course, we've been talking about that in the mentoring workshop as a super important coaching skill. So this venting is going on. So and there is this need for clearing. But when this venting is going on, you are listening to what's really out there. So this is where you go in your level 3 listening, where you open all your senses and you let your intuition understand, hey, what is really out there? And you might actually identify the topic, or maybe more than one topic, that can and need to be discussed further during the session. It is very well possible that your mentee will come with something. From the venting, you identify, using your intuition, that there is actually another topic which is much more important. And that can tie into certain competencies that wants to work on. Often what I've seen and in my experience, it's often related to team management. It can happen that somebody in the self-assessment says, well, my team management is good, but often then from the venting, you realize together, hey, there's a topic there that maybe we can address. And finally, a coaching skill that you can use in the venting phase very well is acknowledgement. Just to remember, an acknowledgement starts with you are. You are good at that. You are a real team player. You are caring for your team. And venting, when there's a lot going on, what you often can find out during the venting is, hey, there have been some moves by the mentee that are actually pretty good. And if you generally feel that, eh, acknowledgement is, you have a great opportunity to do an acknowledgement and give feedback on the good work that they are delivering. Um, I always say this is not done enough in MSF ever. So please use acknowledgement. It really happened to me a lot during a mentoring conversation when I did an acknowledgement that a mentee said, "Oh, that is the first time that I hear that." And of course, I was not in the line because I was in the mentor, but just for somebody to hear, actually, they're on the right track, they're on the right way. And that's also one of the goals of the mentoring is for the mentee to discover their role. So use acknowledgement as much as possible. Anything to add, Agnese?
No, you were brilliant and very clear, Richard. So moving
Thank
on
you.
to reflection. We identified articulating what's going on, reframing, and bottom lining. So articulating what's going on is really about you're observing something and you want to name it, because as long as you just observe it, it's of no use for the mentee. So you want to articulate it, you want to name it, you want to share it with the mentee. So, and we have a structure for this. We really use our senses. So if you're on a video call, for example, you can say, I see, and you really name something you are seeing. So for example, I see you're looking down. I see your shoulders are really low. I see you stop smiling. So something you really pick with the sight. Or you can use the hearing. So I hear your voice is shaking. I hear your voice is breaking. I hear your voice is slowing down. What's happening? And you get curious about it. Or you can say, I sense, when it's more about a sensation, a feeling you're having. Like, I sense struggle. I sense frustration. So it's all information you're feeding back to the mentee, and then it's the mentee that sees whether that sits well or not and where to take it from. You can also say, I notice. And notice is more something generally about, the general situation. You can say, I notice there's a shift in energy. I notice a change. Okay, so then for reframing. The objective here is really to offer new perspective. It's really to open up to new interpretation. So the typical example of reframing is like the glass half full or half empty. So it might be that the mentee is seeing it as half empty, and you want to show that, look, it's also half full. So the same fact looked from a different perspective or interpreted differently. For example, a supervisor gives you a negative feedback and you're so hooked on that negative feedback you think you're not seen, you're not appreciated. A reframing of that could be, well, it looks like your manager really trusts that you can do something with this feedback. It really trusts that you can improve. Seems like your manager is really committed to your growth and to your relationship. Then there's bottom lining. And the objective here is to find the essence of a given topic or of a given situation. What's at the core? What's at the essence of what the mentee is saying? When you listen, there are many words, and sometimes, the mentee is confused. There's so many components and things to keep in the mind at the same time, and you want to look for brevity, for the essence. This is helpful both for the mentee and for the mentor. So as a mentor, you want to make sure that you don't spend too much time talking. For example, if you have a question you want to ask, don't justify it. Don't go into like, yeah, you said that and then that. So this is why I'm thinking maybe, and then you drop the question. No, just go for the question. Keep it super simple. Go to the essence. And for the mentees, when, for example, a mentee is describing a situation and he's saying like, oh, and he said, and then she replied, and then he replied back that, and then she was upset. And maybe you can just ask, what's the essence? Or if you have an intuition, as Richard mentioned before, on what the essence is, you can also propose it. Oh, I have a feeling, I'm sensing loneliness here. And you throw it there at the mentee. To bring clarity and to, connect the mentee to the essence. anything. Also, a good one could be like, what's the topic? When they're venting, for example, also when, it could be just, what's the topic here, really?
Mm.
Yeah. Richard, you want to add anything?
No, that was a very good one at the end. What's the topic here? Eh? So what is it that has been keeping you so busy, and what do we want to talk about in our mentoring?
Right.
The third phase that we identified in a typical mentoring session is to work on competencies. As indicated by Agnese, that is the overarching goal of the mentoring is for the mentee to work on the competencies that are required for the position that the mentee is taking. We identified again 3 coaching skills. One is hold the mentee's agenda. With that, we mean not only that, of course, the agenda is been decided by the mentee, but you, the coaching, in terms of a coaching skill used as a mentor, we mean here that you bring the discussion from the mentoring session into the competencies that the mentee wants to work on. I sometimes call that it's the magic of the mentoring. There is maybe a hot potato for your mentee, or there is a topic that a mentee brings. You talk about it, but while doing that, you're actually working on the competencies. While discussing that, there are highlights, insights, or steps that your mentee will take that contribute to their working on the competencies, which is the overall competencies. So when you are holding the mentee's agenda, what you do is you bring the discussion back to the competencies. And a remark for that can, for example, be, hey, I think we've been just discussing that you're working on your team management skills. Or, hey, we identify here that we've been discussing today how you can profile yourself different as a leader. Of course, always in mentoring, when you do that kind of intuitive reaction is, what do you think? So you bring it back to the mentee. But yeah, it's excellent for you to do as a mentor to bring the topics that are discussed during the mentor session back to the mentee's goals, and that would be the competencies to work on. A second coaching skill is inquiry. It can happen in a mentoring session that you have a discussion, and actually it needs probably some quiet time for your mentee to think about it. You can start that and have a chat during the mentoring session, but it might be something that just popped up on, hey, I need to think about this a little bit, and spend a bit of time for this on my own. If you identify that in the mentoring conversation, you can bring in the coaching skills of inquiry. So there is some time for the mentee to think about it and explore. Some examples of a typical inquiry question from you as a mentor could be, how are you with self-care? If the issue is I'm not taking care of myself, or when there is a debate about a relationship with authorities, what is your relationships with authority? And there might be some time to think about. Or what triggers your rage? So an inquiry is really to give something to your mentee to work on maybe in between sessions, and then probably report back the next time you meet. Mentioning report back on, in the end, we're not doing this mentoring just to have a nice conversation. In the end, we want to bring things into reality. So what often happens during a mentor conversation is that mentees have an insight and say, well, this is what I'm going to do, or this is what I want to do, or this is the next step that I want to take. So by applying the coaching skill of action, you name that. So, hey, you said you will talk to your direct supervisor. Hey, you said that you will discuss this and this and this with that team member. So you remind your mentee what the action is, and you bring in accountability. So by when will you actually do it? You don't do that as a mentor because you have responsibility. The responsibility is fully with the mentee. But by using the skill of accountability, you are making sure that the mentee actually does what they commit to be doing. So you say, hey, by when will you do that? And how will we together be sure that you actually do it? And by using the action and accountability coaching skill, you actually bring in reality what has been discussed during the mentoring session. All right. Anything to add, Agnese?
That was great. So shall we move into the Q&A session?
Yes. So now we open the floor to all of you with questions that maybe you have already been putting in the chat. So we're checking in with Jules if there are some questions that we already have.
Yes, 2 questions for now. One that is quite practical, I guess. Can we have the written explanation behind the different role afterwards?
Definitely. Yes, we'll do that.
All right. This is
Also about the coaching skills.
Agnese very much used the skill of bottom line here. Yes, we will do it. Come to the point.
And by when, if we want to use accountability, I would say by the end of next week for sure.
Okay, other question. I guess if I reformulate it, is does inquiry equal powerful questions?
Well, an inquiry is to use the skill is to say use a powerful question, but there is really the action behind that somebody will think it over. So you do it as something where you frame, hey, this is something that you need to think about. I've been in the mentoring discussion sometimes where somebody says, oh, I need to figure out what are the pluses and minuses of the different actions that I can take. And it was probably too much to cover during the mentoring session. So an inquiry can be then, all right, would you put all the pluses and minuses together and reflect on that? And then we'll come back to it in our next session, or you drop me an email. So the more powerful indeed the question is, the more it will resonate with your mentee so that they actually will do and work on the inquiry.
Thank you.
You wanted to add something, Agnese?
I was just wondering how clear to everyone what we mean by powerful question is.
Maybe explain it.
Pardon?
Explain it.
Yeah. So a powerful question is a question. And we have a definition for it, and the objective of the powerful question is to take you to a place of exploration. So it's not an answer that you should know already in a way. So in that sense, it's powerful because it allows you to explore. It's a question that usually doesn't like to start with a why. And it's not a question, it's not a closed question, a question that ends with a yes or a no, right? So it's an open question that starts usually with a what. For example, a typical one is, what's important about it? What's important for you about it? And we say they usually should have a limit of 7 words, but it's really just to remember of being really concise and really, short. So this is the powerful question.
Thank you. Next question. How to avoid the accountability section to become managerial?
Can you repeat?
How to avoid the accountability section to become managerial?
Well, I can take that one, Agnese, and you can add later. What often happens in a mentoring conversation, and when you apply the pure form of the coaching skill, action, and accountability, is what you do is you bring back the action that your mentee came up. Your mentee will probably say, hey, I need to discuss this difficult issue with my direct supervisor. So it is something that your mentee plans to do anyway. You building in the accountability not to sort of like play the boss, but with as intention that you want to make sure that the mentee actually does it. So if you then bring, okay, so you say that the next best step for you is to discuss this difficult topic with your direct supervisor, by when will you actually do that? So you're helping your mentee to bring the intention into reality. And that's also where then, your mentee can move on from there. In coaching words, you use the word transformation. That's where transformation is taking place. So it's in support of the mentee. And that's the difference with a mentor who says, a manager who says, I need that report tomorrow at 9 o'clock on my desk. No, it's something that your mentee has brought him or herself, and you hold them accountable. Hey, will you actually do that? And that brings them into action.
Yeah, and just to add a bit on that, I just wanted to say that sometimes, you really want to do something, but maybe the fear or concerns about it, make you think of all the things that doesn't make it possible, or like how you should postpone it, procrastination and all these things. So having someone you're accountable to really helps you taking that extra scary step sometimes and go for it and just do it without justifications, without limiting thoughts.
Okay, well, we'll stay on the topic of accountability with the next question that is about explain a little bit more the relationship between action and accountability.
All right. So the action is what comes out of the mentoring session, where a mentee says, this is what I'm going to do. Or when you maybe have been discussing as mentor and mentee, you've been exploring different options, and finally there is a decision made during the mentoring conversation. Hey, this is the next step that I will do. I will actually take off next week because I'm very, very tired, or actually I will discuss that topic with that difficult staff member in my team. So that is the thing to do. The accountability is actually making sure that the mentee does it. So the accountability is, okay, by when and how will we know? So it's not about what is going to happen, but it's more by when and how will we make sure. And again, the focus is to give that little boost to the mentee that they actually take that step. When you do a follow-up on accountability, it's something that you agree. How will we know? Can we discuss it in the next session? Or how will we know that you actually do it? I'll drop you a line. I'll write you an email. What you don't do then is next to, there can be a feedback on what happened, because there might be a follow-up topic coming from it. But usually when the accountability is done, you don't go back too much to the action. It's more to check in. As a coach, you don't have an agenda for the accountability. It's in service of your mentee to actually do it.
And just to add on that, it's not like every session has necessarily to end with an action. We're talking actions that come out of the session naturally, physiologically, that kind of seem like the good next step, as Richard was saying. So it's not an action just for the sake of taking action. It's a meaningful action coming from a meaningful place for the mentee that really means that he's going to kind of either face a demon or stretch himself, or it's an action that kind of holds what Richard was saying, that holds that transformation in it. Because once you take whatever insight you had or new awareness into action, there's new learning from there. And so in the next session, you can then discuss, okay, so now you did that. How was it? What is the new insight? What is the new awareness?
Okay, we'll stay one more question maybe on accountability that just came. What if the mentee ends up never taking action? How much do you insist without becoming too directive?
You want to take that one, Agnese, or?
Yeah. So you design that with your mentee. You ask the mentee. So I noticed that we decide these things, and then we do the action, the accountability, and then when you show up to the next session, you've never done it. So how do you want me to be about it? Because as a mentor, you're there serving the mentee. You're at service of whatever goal he wants to achieve or she wants to achieve. So you can design that. You can ask, how do you want me to be? Or you can also ask, is there anything in the actions we are identifying that is off, that doesn't really work for you? Should we look at other types of actions? Anything you want to add, Richard?
Yeah. Again, as the mentor, you don't own the agenda. So even if there is a decision, for example, and I've been using this example a bit more, hey, I'm going to discuss that with my direct supervisor. Finally, it's the decision of the mentee to deal with that. It can happen that time has passed, and from the mentoring, the discussion during the mentoring, there is something buzzing around the head of the mentee, and maybe there was some thinking over, and the mentee might take a different step, does a different action. So it is very well possible when you then rediscuss in the next session, well, I was going to discuss that with my direct supervisor, but actually I did A, B, and C, and then you look at that from there. You see, hey, wow, that's perfectly fine. There was an action. It's not about for you as the mentor that you want a certain action, as long as it's satisfying and useful for your mentee. So yeah, you wouldn't put too much pressure. If you have a constant discussion on, yes, I'm going to do that, but it's never done. Yes, then you need to go a little bit back to the drawing board and say, hey, what do you want to get out of this?
And also, there's this idea that there's learning in that as well. So what's the learning from the mentee never doing that? Is this something he does only or she does only in the relationship, or is this something that happens also outside of the mentoring relationship? So there could be also some learning from that.
All right. Next question. Articulating what's going on. In such multicultural organization, I sometimes fear to mention things like assent, since it might block the relationship, especially at the beginning of the mentoring process. Any experiences about that from the mentors?
Yeah, I can share, at least from my side, and then Richard, you can add. For me, it's about asking permission. So you can say, do I have the permission to share something I'm sensing, I'm feeling about this? So you kind of check in before you ask, or you can also do it after. I'm sensing this. Is this okay for me to say this? Give you this type of feedback? Is that okay?
Yeah. So what you're highlighting is, Agnese, is the mentoring agreement. How do we work together? So you ideally you have agreed that hey, can I use my intuition and articulate what's going on? You can do that in your mutual agreement at that level, or you can check it in at that very moment where you say, hey, this is what I'm sensing, and then take it from there. A mentoring conversation is in a safe space. So you're only with the mentor and the mentee. So usually it's fine to name that. It's not about a big crowd who will also look at what's being discussed. So that can work out usually quite fine.
Okay. Another question. So it was Patrice's question. How's the approach of mentoring by the MC Hub changed, and do we do mentoring differently today than we did a few years ago? I guess this is the question. How has mentoring changed in the approach of the MC Hub?
I can start with an answer on that, Agnese. No, the idea of non-interference with operations and that everything is strictly confidential, and that a mentor is an additional support for somebody who is going to a first-time coordination position has not changed. So there is no different concept or goal behind the mentoring than in the past. What we trying to do is where possible, and that's also the background of this webinar, is to add coaching skills to the toolbox for the mentor, especially also for some mentors who had a third or a fourth or a fifth mentee, where sometimes we get requests from people that want a mentoring, but they actually say, I want to really to come to my own solutions. And then we're also looking for try to do a matching with a mentor who knows about that, and then can apply a bit more coaching skills, looking more at the individual and the personal level rather than on the tasks or the competencies. Anything to add to that, Agnese?
Yeah, I would say it didn't change for the mentoring and coaching hub, but it might have changed in the movement. So before it was seen maybe more, there were some OCs that were using, mentoring and coaching as going to the field, for example, and supporting also technically someone to perform in their position. And more we have like, a more like shared understanding of what mentoring and coaching is, and yet we still have a lot of diversity in the movement. I don't know if that simplifies things, but that's the reality.
And last question is, maybe it's been a little bit unclear the difference between mentoring and coaching, and to what extent coaching comes into the mentoring part. So I don't know if you want to touch a little bit upon that, or if you want to do that in a recap in the next slide. But maybe like re-explain quickly the difference, and when does coaching comes into mentoring.
Well, if I use it in bottom lining, based on the offer we're doing, then a mentor can share experiences from his or her own experience, and can give advice. And the mentor has experience in the job of the mentee, where a coach can have that, but it's strictly not necessary. And a coach would not share experience and not focus. Also a little bit, if you would do it a bit black and white, you would say in the mentoring, the focus is on the competencies for the job. So looking a bit outside of the mentee to what needs to be achieved, while a coach looks more inside into the person. What do you want? What is the potential that you want to unlock?
Maybe insist a little bit on what are I guess that was the whole webinar, but maybe name a few coaching skills that you use in the mentoring, or develop why you use them.
Well, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead, Agnese.
Yeah, I guess what we're trying to touch here is the fact that it's great to give advice. It's great to have your opinions. It's great to guide the person, to point a direction for the mentee, right? And it's also great to instead forget that you know all that. Put all your experience aside and just, be there for your mentee for whatever his truth about things or her truth about things are, and allow for the mentee to come up. So these are the two, in a way, pulls and push in a mentoring relationship, right? Moving from, when it's needed, when the situation requires it, moving into a guiding role, and when it's instead the moment for the mentee to come up and come out. And that's also when you gain the confidence, when you come out with your own solutions, with your own truths, and with your own ideas and opinions, and are able to bring them out there. That's when the self-confidence grows. So it's balance. It's the act of balancing these two components of the mentoring, I would say. I don't know if that answered the question.
I hope so. No answer in the chat at least, so we'll see. Maybe we move to the wrap up.
So a wrap up of today, and we've put it on a little slide for you to have the overview. So what did we cover today? We had a short word about the difference and similarities between mentoring and coaching to set a little bit the frame, and luckily we also had a question about that in the Q&A to highlight a bit more. Then we have been hanging up our introduction of different coaching skills that can be used in the mentoring process by first highlighting what are different roles that you can have as a mentor. Huh? And we highlighted 4, you could identify more, but we showed those. And then from there, we zoomed in on the coach role that that you can have. And then to give this something workable for you, we've been hanging up those coaching skills, highlighting 3 each for the 3 phases that typically we've identified always happen in the mentoring session. Venting, reflection, and work on competencies. And we've chosen the 3 coaching skills that we believe are most easy to use in each of those 3 phases. So that's what we've been covering. And then we've been doing a Q&A with thank you very much, with quite some questions from you. So you're actively writing in the chat.
And maybe while people write, we can still take maybe 1-2 more questions to give people a bit of time to write.
Yeah, no new questions so far. So we'll just let people write, maybe.
Yeah. What do you want to do, Jules? You want to read some of those comments out, or do we take them with us for preparation of next webinars?
Maybe take them with us and include them in the slides that we will share to the participants.
All right, thank you. Then, yeah, I guess we come to a close here. Agnese, maybe you can put on the last slide. And then,
you see it?
yeah, something that we will do, we will share this presentation with you, so we will send that to you, and we will add some notes of what we've been explaining with the slides, so we will send that to you. And also we will send you a link to the recording, because we've been recording this webinar, so you can look back at it, or if there is somebody that you know that is interested, you can share the link so they can have a look at it. Anything to add to that, Agnese or Jules?
I just want to say that this is, of course, a part of a webinar series, and so more webinars are going to come. I have asked the participants also to give their preference for the next one. That's been, well noted, and you'll hear from us with the rest of the calendar for this webinar series. I want to also to say that as part of the continuous professional development, the idea here is to not just have this one-time workshop at the beginning of, let's say, the mentor career, but also to follow up and provide some supports as the mentor go along in their experience. And this is, in a way, the most technical component of it. So here we're going to be a bit more like sharing sort of inputs, technical inputs for mentors. And then the other offers are like group supervision, so groups in which you have a group of peers, mentors, and there's a facilitator, and you share experience and dilemmas about your mentoring practice. And then there's going to be the peer support, so you're going to be able to choose a buddy that you want to kind of connect with to share another mentor, basically, to share how you go along in your experience. What are the what's the experience? What's good? What's bad? What's maybe to bring up to our attention and so on. And there's also going to be a chat room at one point, in which you're going to be allowed to go in and discuss different topics, and there are going to be different communities in the chat. So really, this is the technical bit, and then the other bits are going to be more like sharing, creating a network, and peer support.
All right, then we'll come to a close. We'll keep this line still open for the next few minutes or so to wrap up your comments and any feedback that you have for us, or any other question, and we'll answer you directly. So thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you so much for showing up. and for all your good questions.